I think one of the hardest wounds to talk about is church hurt. Because when people hurt you, that's painful. But when people hurt you in a place that was supposed to feel safe, that hits differently. When it happens in church, it can shake things deeper. Because church isn't just where you went. It's where you worshiped, where you served, where you trusted, where you expected to encounter God. And when that place becomes a source of pain, it can feel confusing. You're not just grieving people. Sometimes you're grieving expectations, community, trust, the version of church you thought existed. And for some people, that hurt quietly becomes distance from God. Not because they stopped believing in Him, but because the pain got attached to Him. And today, I want to sit in that honesty for a minute. Because I think there's a lot of men and women carrying church hurt today. And they've never really processed it emotionally or spiritually. They just walked away carrying it. Welcome to Unmasked, where we take off the filters and get real about faith, failure, and finding freedom. I'm your host, Wesley Farnsworth, a dad, veteran, author, and a man who's learned that God does His best work in the middle of our mess. Each episode, we have honest conversations with people who have walked through addiction, pain, or doubt, and with pastors, leaders, and everyday believers who are learning to live and lead authentically. So take a breath, pull up a chair, and let's get real. This is Unmasked. I'm the first to admit church hurt is complicated. I've been there. I've experienced it. It's complicated because from the outside, people often minimize it. Church is full of imperfect people. Just forgive and move on. Keep your eyes on Jesus. Those are all things that people will say to minimize it. And listen, there's truth in those statements. But timing matters. Because when somebody is bleeding emotionally, quick answers can feel dismissive. Church hurt often isn't just about one event. Sometimes it's betrayal, rejection. Sometimes it's spiritual manipulation or leadership failure. Maybe it's gossip or feeling unseen in the place that preaches community. And sometimes it's death by 1,000 small wounds, and not just one big thing. Just repeated disappointment, repeated hurt, repeated silence. The difficult part of all of this is that church isn't just another organization. It carries spiritual meaning. People meet God there. They serve there. They raise their families there. And so when pain happens there, it often gets tangled up with faith. The hurt doesn't just stay horizontal. It becomes vertical. And people start asking questions that they never expected to ask. Where was God? Why did this happen? How could people who love Jesus act like this? And those are all honest questions. And I think God can handle honest questions, don't you? I think one of the biggest dangers of church hurt, though, is accidentally attaching people's failures to God's character. You see, people fail, leaders fail, churches fail, systems fail. But God does not fail. That distinction, my friends, matters. Because if we're not careful, The hurt done by people will slowly reshape how we see God. And before long, we stop trusting Him because of what somebody else did. Not intentionally, but just gradually over time. And that can lead to a temptation to walk away completely. I can understand why some people choose to leave. I've been hurt by churches as well. Because pain makes distance feel safe. If a church hurt you, distance feels protective. You think, if I stay away, I can't get hurt again. And sometimes temporary distance is needed to heal. But isolation becomes dangerous when it also becomes permanent. Because hurt has a way of talking when we're alone. And if pain stays unprocessed, if it becomes bitterness, that's when things go bad. I think a lot of people need to process church hurt, but they don't. Instead, they relocate it. They leave one church and just carry that wound into another. They stop serving. They stop trusting. They stop connecting. Or if they do stay in the church physically, they're not there emotionally. They withdraw. They just show up. They smile. They volunteer. But internally, they're constantly on guard. They're disconnected. They're just waiting for it to happen again. And honestly, that's the kind of hurt that changes people. I think men specifically handle church hurt by shutting down. Not talking, not processing, just withdrawing. They stop attending. They stop leading. They stop engaging spiritually. And externally, it looks like disinterest. But internally, it's grief, disappointment, betrayal. Because men often process things privately. Because nobody needs to see it. So they just disappear. And when I think about that, it breaks my heart. Because men, hear me when I say this, don't lose faith. You may have lost trust, but don't lose faith. I think healing starts with honesty. You have to name the wound. Was it rejection, betrayal, manipulation, abuse of authority, disappointment, unmet expectations? Whatever it is, name it. You can't heal what you refuse to identify. And sometimes church hurt gets spiritually bypassed. We just rush straight to the forgiveness without acknowledging the pain. But the grief matters, just like honesty matters. God never asks us to pretend that wounds don't exist. And I think this part matters, because Jesus himself was hurt by religious people. Did you hear me there? Jesus himself was hurt by religious people. He experienced misunderstanding, rejection, hypocrisy. The people who should have recognized him often resisted him. And somehow, he never allowed broken people to redefine the Father. Let that sit for a second, because that is difficult. He experienced pain without confusing human failure with God's character. And that is not easy, but it's important. I think it's also important to realize that forgiveness is not the same as pretending. I'm going to say this as clearly as I can. Forgiveness is not pretending. Forgiveness is not minimizing. Forgiveness is not immediately trusting again. And forgiveness does not mean that the wound wasn't real. Some people hear forgive and think it means act like it didn't happen. That's not healing. That, my friends, is avoidance. Real forgiveness usually walks through grief first. A lot of people talk about God after church hurt, but not with God. And there's a difference there. They deconstruct privately. They process things with friends. They carry anger internally, but they never actually bring the wound honestly before God. And honestly, that is where the healing starts. Not because answers arrive instantly, but because the relationship stays open. Prayer doesn't have to sound polished. Sometimes it just sounds like, God, I'm angry. God, I'm disappointed. God, I don't know what to do with this. Talk to him like you would your friend, sitting across from you at the table. Because that's what he wants. That honesty, it matters. In community, it still matters too. This can be hard to say, but I think it's true. Church hurt does not mean that community stops mattering. Because healing often happens with people. Not perfect people, safe people, healthy people, honest people. And yes, finding those people after hurt can feel terrifying. But isolation rarely heals relational wounds. Healthy connection often does. Say that again. Isolation rarely heals relational wounds, but healthy connection often does. It does it slowly, carefully, and over time. I want to slow down here for just a second because I think next part is important for you to hear. Church, it's important. But my friends, church is not God. People represent him imperfectly. We are broken people in a broken world. We are not perfect. So people are going to represent him imperfectly. Sometimes, though, they do it beautifully. Other times it's going to be painful. But human failure does not erase divine goodness. Your relationship with God is bigger than the place where you got hurt. Don't let broken people become the final interpreter of God's heart. Take the time and bring the hurt to God. And when you're ready to return to the church, it'll be there. For some people listening, you may be in the middle of all this. You may not yet be ready, and that's okay. Healing has timing. But when you're ready, move slowly. Look for health. Look for humility. Look for places where masks come off. You don't need a perfect church. You need honest people pursuing Jesus together. Those are completely different things. Church hurt is real, but it doesn't have to become spiritual exile. You are allowed to grieve. You are allowed to heal. And you are allowed to process. But don't build your entire future around a wound, because pain was never meant to become your identity. So here's your action step this week. Ask yourself this honestly. What part of my church hurt am I still carrying that I haven't actually brought before God? Not discussed, not analyzed, not avoided, but brought before Him. And then spend 10 quiet minutes this week just telling God the truth about it all. Not polished, not highly edited, just honest conversation, because healing begins where honesty and God finally meet. Thanks for joining me today on Unmasked. If something in this episode spoke to you, don't let it stop with you. Share it with the one person that God put on your heart while you were listening. You never know whose breakthrough might start with just a simple message from you. If you want more encouragement, you want to work with me one-on-one, or you're interested in having me speak at your church or event, you can find everything at wesleyfarnsworth.com. And make sure you join the Unmasked community by connecting with me on social media so that we can keep walking this journey together. Until next time, remember that grace is greater than your past, and real freedom, true freedom, begins the moment that you choose to live unmasked. God bless you.